I'm Amber, 32, and a senior software architect living a quiet, successful life that my family knows nothing about. My younger brother Nathan has always been the golden child, despite my achievements outshining his. When he invited me to his housewarming party for his new two-bedroom apartment, I knew exactly what would happen. Another family gathering where Nathan would find subtle ways to put me down while our parents beamed with pride. I just never expected how dramatically this particular evening would change everything. If you're watching this video, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about family dynamics that'll make yours seem normal. Trust me, this house party took an unexpected turn no one saw coming. Growing up with Nathan was like living in a constant competition where the rules always changed to ensure he won. 3 years younger than me, he somehow always managed to be the center of our parents' universe. Joyce and Walter Miller, my ever-doting parents, but only toward their son, had a particular vision of success that I never quite fit into. From elementary school onward, the pattern was clear. When I brought home straight A's, they'd nod and say, "That's nice, honey." When Nathan brought home BS and CS with 1A, they'd celebrate with ice cream and praise about his exceptional intelligence. The disparity was subtle at first, then glaring as we entered our teens. I started at community college because we couldn't afford more, working 2 part-time jobs while studying computer science. Meanwhile, my parents stretched themselves financially to send Nathan to a private university where he coasted through a business degree with average grades. After graduation, I climbed the corporate ladder methodically, starting as a junior developer at a small startup and working my way up through larger companies. 6 months ago, I received a promotion to senior software architect at Griffin Technologies, one of the leading software development firms in our city. With the substantial salary increase came the opportunity to purchase what I'd always dreamed of, a 5-bedroom house in Oakwood Estates, a quiet, upscale neighborhood with tree-lined streets and a community pool. My home has a spacious backyard with a private pool, a home office, and enough room that I could finally have the space I always craved growing up in our cramped family home. But I made a conscious decision not to share this milestone with my family. Experience had taught me that my achievements would either be downplayed or somehow twisted into a competition with Nathan. So I kept it to myself, allowing them to continue believing I rented a modest 1-bedroom apartment downtown. Only Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, knew the truth. Unlike my parents, Aunt Patricia had always seen me clearly. She'd been the one to buy me my first programming book when I was 14, recognizing my aptitude for logic and problem-solving. Throughout the years, she'd remained my confidant and supporter, often the only adult who acknowledged my hard work and determination. I remember distinctly when I was 11, I'd spent weeks building a model solar system for the science fair. It was intricate, with planets that actually rotated around the sun, using a small motor I'd figured out how to install. The night before the fair, Nathan, then 8, knocked it over, accidentally. Instead of making him apologize, my parents rushed to help him create a simple baking soda volcano in 2 hours. When my repaired solar system won first place, my parents praised Nathan for handling disappointment so maturely, when his volcano only got an honorable mention. These patterns continued into adulthood. When I landed my first developer job, the family dinner conversation focused on Nathan's new apartment with a roommate. When I got my first promotion, my parents were more interested in Nathan's company softball team making the league finals. I learned to stop sharing my milestones and to maintain emotional distance as self-preservation. Over time, I built a life separate from my family. I cultivated friendships with people who valued me, like my best friend Diana, who couldn't understand why I continued to subject myself to family gatherings that invariably left me feeling diminished. Genetic obligation, I'd tell her with a wry smile, though we both knew it was more complicated than that. A mixture of hope that things might change and the lingering desire for parental approval that never quite dies, no matter how old you get. I develop strategies for these family encounters. Keep conversations superficial, ask lots of questions about others to avoid talking about myself, and always have an exit strategy planned. It wasn't healthy, perhaps, but it was functional. And in the meantime, I built a successful career, maintained meaningful friendships, and created a beautiful home that was my sanctuary, even if almost no one in my family knew it existed. The invitation to Nathan's housewarming arrived by text 3 weeks ago. Finally closed on that 2-bedroom I told everyone about. Mom and Dad thought you should be there for the housewarming. Saturday the 15th, 6 p.m. No question about whether I was available. No acknowledgement that we hadn't spoken in nearly 2 months. Just the assumption that I would show up because our parents thought I should. My first instinct was to invent an excuse. A work emergency, perhaps, or a sudden flu. But within minutes of receiving Nathan's text, my mother called. Did you get Nathan's invitation? Isn't it wonderful about his new apartment? Such a big step up in the world. You really must come, Amber. Family should be together for these milestones. The familiar pressure built in my chest as I listened to her gush about Nathan's accomplishment of securing a standard mortgage for an ordinary apartment. I wanted to tell her about my house. The closing process, the feeling of standing in my own foyer with keys in hand, the way the afternoon sunlight streamed through the bay windows in the living room. But I swallowed those words and simply agreed to attend. After hanging up, I called Diana. You're enabling them, she said flatly when I told her I was going. Why put yourself through this again? Because saying no creates more drama than it's worth, I replied, pacing around my kitchen island that was larger than the entire kitchen in my parents' house. It's one evening. I'll bring a nice gift, smile through the inevitable comparisons, and leave early. The next day, I drove to Williams-Sonoma to find an appropriate housewarming gift. As I browsed through overpriced kitchen gadgets and linens, I rehearsed neutral responses to the questions I knew would come. No, still at the same company. Yes, the apartment is fine. No, no one's special in my life right now. Half-truths and deflections that had become second nature. I selected an artisanal bread basket with gourmet olive oil. Tasteful but not ostentatious. Nothing that would trigger Nathan's competitive nature or make it obvious I could afford much more. As the party approached, memories of previous family gatherings surfaced with increasing frequency. Last Thanksgiving, Nathan had announced his promotion to regional sales manager just as I was about to mention my team's successful completion of a major project. All attention immediately shifted to him, with my father proposing a toast to the family's rising star. I'd said nothing about my achievement after that. 2 days before the housewarming, Aunt Patricia called. Will I see you at Nathan's gathering? She asked, a knowing tone in her voice. I'll be there, I confirmed, bearing gifts and prepared for the usual. You know, Amber, she said carefully, there comes a point when hiding your light doesn't serve you anymore. It just lets others control the narrative. It's easier this way, I insisted, though her words resonated more than I wanted to admit. The day before the party, my car started making a troubling noise. I took it to a nearby garage where the mechanic, a gray-haired man named Frank, chatted while he worked. Heading somewhere special? He asked, noticing the wrapped gift on my back seat. My brother's housewarming, I replied. Family gatherings, he nodded knowingly. Got 4 sisters myself. Took me 50 years to figure out family knows exactly how to push your buttons because they installed them. I laughed despite myself. Any wisdom to share on handling that? He wiped his hands on a rag and looked at me thoughtfully. Only that pretending to be less than you are doesn't help anybody, not them, not you. His simple insight stayed with me as I drove home with my repaired car. That evening, I stood in my walk-in closet, deliberately selecting an outfit that wouldn't draw attention. Dark jeans and a simple blouse that gave no hint of my financial status. As I laid the clothes out, I seriously considered not going. I could claim car trouble, which wouldn't even be a complete lie. But something in me resisted the easy way out. Perhaps it was Aunt Patricia's words, or Frank the mechanic's unexpected wisdom, or simply fatigue with the familiar pattern. Whatever the reason, I decided that this time, I would go with a different mindset. Not expecting anything to change, but at least knowing that I was attending on my terms. The morning of the party, I woke early and took a long run through my neighborhood, past manicured lawns and elegant homes similar to mine. The physical exertion helped clear my mind and settle my nerves. I spent the afternoon catching up on work emails, then took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away some of my anxiety. As I dressed, I reminded myself that I had nothing to prove to anyone. My success spoke for itself, even if my family couldn't hear it. With this small armor of self-assurance, I grabbed Nathan's gift and headed out, programming my GPS to his new apartment complex across town. I pulled into the visitor parking space at Riverside Apartments, a mid-range complex with uniform beige buildings stretching across several acres. Nathan's unit was in Building C, a 3-story walk-up with small balconies adorned with varying degrees of plant life and patio furniture. From the outside, it looked pleasant enough, clean, well-maintained, but certainly nothing extraordinary. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the gift bag and made my way to apartment 302. Before I could knock, the door swung open to reveal Samantha, Nathan's wife of 2 years, whom he'd met at his company's holiday party. She had a genuine smile, unlike my brother's often calculating one. "Amber, so glad you could make it," she said, pulling me into a quick hug. Come in, come in." Nathan's showing some of his work friends the guest bathroom renovation. I stepped into a modest entryway that opened directly into the combined living and dining area. About a dozen people milled around, holding drinks and small plates of appetizers. The apartment was freshly painted in contemporary gray tones with white trim, furnished with pieces I recognized from IKEA and Target catalogs. "Let me give you the tour while Nathan's occupied," Samantha offered, taking the gift bag from my hands. "This is so nice of you, by the way." She led me through the living area, pointing out features with pride. We upgraded to stainless steel appliances in the kitchen, and the countertops are quartz. Well, quartz look laminate, but doesn't it look great? "It's lovely," I said sincerely, noting her enthusiasm. There was something refreshing about Samantha's honest pride in their home, without the competitive edge Nathan always brought to conversations. "The main bedroom fits our queen bed with nightstands, just barely," she laughed, showing me a room that indeed had minimal walking space around the furniture. "And here's the second bedroom we're using as a home office for now, though hopefully not too far in the future it'll be a nursery." The second bedroom was small but functional, with a desk positioned beneath the window to maximize the limited floor space. I noticed a framed certificate on the wall, Nathan's Employee of the Quarter award from last year. As we completed the tour, Samantha introduced me to some of their friends, most of whom worked with either her or Nathan. I made small talk, answering vague questions about what I did. I work in software development, and where I lived, not far from downtown. "Nathan says you're still renting," one of his colleagues commented. "Smart move in this market, really. Much more flexibility." I simply smiled, neither confirming nor denying. Years of practice had made me adept at these conversational deflections. More guests arrived, including my parents, who swept in with the energy of visiting dignitaries. My mother immediately spotted me but paused first to embrace Nathan, who had emerged from showing off the bathroom. "There's our successful son. The apartment is just gorgeous, darling. So sophisticated." She kissed his cheek, then turned to me with considerably less enthusiasm. "Amber, good to see you made it." My father clapped Nathan on the shoulder. "Property owner now. That's what I like to see. Building equity instead of throwing money away on rent." He gave me a pointed look that I pretended not to notice. Nathan guided them through the same tour I'd just completed, but his version included embellishments that made me raise an eyebrow. The laminate countertops became premium surfaces. The cramped second bedroom was described as spacious enough for multiple purposes, and he referred to the complex's small communal pool as resort-style amenities. As my parents oohed and awed over each exaggerated feature, I caught Aunt Patricia watching me from across the room. She'd arrived silently during the second tour and now gave me a knowing smile and subtle eye roll that made me stifle a laugh. Throughout the next hour, I observed Nathan holding court, explaining to anyone who would listen how he'd negotiated hard on the purchase price and how the property was already appreciating significantly. From my knowledge of the local real estate market, having recently purchased my own home, I knew his claims were optimistic at best, fictional at worst. Mingling with other guests, I overheard snippets of conversation that revealed more of Nathan's embellishments about his life. His role as regional sales manager apparently involved overseeing dozens of staff. I knew from Samantha's previous comments that he supervised exactly 3 people. His company was on track to triple revenue this year. Public information showed they were projecting modest 5% growth. I kept my observations to myself, maintaining the pleasant, supportive sister persona I'd perfected over the years. Occasionally, Nathan would direct comments my way that contained subtle digs. "Amber, didn't you say that new project at work is keeping you too busy for a social life?" he asked loudly as I chatted with Samantha's friend from her yoga class. "Work is busy," I replied neutrally. "But fulfilling. I guess that's the difference between our fields," he continued. "In sales, we work hard, but also make time to enjoy life. Different priorities, I suppose." I felt Aunt Patricia's eyes on me from across the room as I smiled tightly and excused myself to get another drink. In the kitchen, she joined me. "How much longer are you going to let him create a fictional narrative about both of your lives?" she asked quietly, helping herself to a glass of wine. "It's not worth the drama to correct him," I replied. She studied me over her glass. "Maybe not for you. But what about everyone who believes his version? Including your parents?" Before I could respond, Nathan called for everyone's attention. The real show was about to begin. "Everyone, gather round," Nathan called, standing in the center of the living room with a champagne flute in hand. Samantha dutifully appeared at his side, smiling up at him with genuine affection that made me wonder, not for the first time, what she saw in my brother beyond his carefully constructed facade. The guests formed a loose semicircle around him, my parents positioning themselves prominently at the front, beaming with anticipation. I hung back near the kitchen doorway, with Aunt Patricia not far away. "First, thank you all for coming to celebrate this milestone with us," Nathan began, his voice taking on the professional cadence he used when he wanted to impress. "As many of you know, I've been working toward this goal for some time. When I was promoted to regional sales director last quarter." "Manager," Samantha corrected gently. "Executive regional manager," Nathan amended without missing a beat, though I knew his title was simply regional sales manager. Anyway, when that happened, I knew it was time to make this move. Property ownership is the cornerstone of building real wealth, as my financial advisor keeps telling me. I suppressed a smile, knowing that his financial advisor was a college friend who sold insurance on the side. "In my position, overseeing our company's expansion into 3 new territories, I've learned that timing is everything," he continued, embellishing his responsibilities yet again. "And with my portfolio performing the way it has been, it was the perfect time to invest in real estate." Our father nodded sagely, clearly impressed by Nathan's financial acumen, despite the fact that I knew from previous family conversations that Nathan had needed our parents to help with the down payment. "It wasn't easy finding a place that met our standards," Nathan went on, gesturing grandly around the modest apartment. "But persistence pays off. That's something I always tell my team. You have to be willing to put in the work to reap the rewards." As he continued his self-congratulatory speech, I felt a familiar mixture of irritation and resigned amusement. This was Nathan's standard performance, taking a normal life achievement and spinning it into evidence of his exceptional nature. I'd seen it countless times before, from his high school graduation, where his 3.2 GPA was described as academic excellence, to his promotion, which he implied was the fastest advancement in company history. Of course, not everyone understands the value of property investment, he said, his gaze suddenly finding me in the crowd. Some people prefer the flexibility of continuing to rent well into their 30s. A few guests chuckled, and I felt my cheeks warm slightly. Nathan had somehow managed to turn his standard dig at my lifestyle into part of his housewarming speech. But that's the beauty of different life paths, isn't it? He continued, his tone making it clear which path he considered superior. Some of us prioritize building equity and establishing roots in a community. Our mother nodded enthusiastically. Nathan has always been so forward-thinking about his future, she added, looking around the room proudly. Encouraged by our parents' approval, Nathan's speech became increasingly pointed. When Samantha and I decided on a 2-bedroom, some people thought we should start with something smaller. But I've always believed in stretching for what you want. That's how you grow. He raised his glass higher. To our new home, 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, and more square footage than most apartments in the downtown area where some people might be renting. He looked directly at me again, his smile sharp. My father laughed, always thinking bigger than most. That's our Nathan. Well, Nathan said, his voice taking on a faux sympathetic tone as he looked at me again. Not everyone can afford a 2-bedroom apartment like this. Some people have different priorities with their money, I guess. The room erupted in laughter, my parents' chuckles among them, their smiles indulgent as they gazed at their son. The familiar feeling of being the family's perpetual punchline washed over me, the sensation of multiple eyes turning to gauge my reaction, the subtle embarrassment of being singled out for perceived failure. In that moment, I felt 16 again, standing in our living room while my parents fawned over Nathan's B+ in algebra while my straight A report card sat unacknowledged on the counter. The same hot flush crept up my neck, the same instinct to shrink myself smaller activated. Years of conditioning had taught me to smile through these moments, to be the good sport, to let Nathan have his spotlight. I forced my face into a neutral expression, but inside, something was shifting. Frank the mechanic's words echoed in my mind. Pretending to be less than you doesn't help anybody, not them, not you. I thought about my beautiful home sitting empty across town, with its spacious rooms and carefully chosen furnishings. I thought about the promotion I'd earned through years of dedicated work, the financial security I'd built without family support or connections. As these thoughts swirled, I became aware of Aunt Patricia watching me intently from across the room. Unlike everyone else, she wasn't laughing. Her expression was a mixture of concern and something else, expectation, perhaps, as if she was waiting to see what I would do next. The laughter gradually subsided, and Nathan prepared to continue his speech, clearly enjoying his moment of triumph at my expense. But before he could speak again, Aunt Patricia's clear voice cut through the lingering chuckles. "Is that why you bought a 5-bedroom house, Amber?" The room fell suddenly, completely silent. Time seemed to freeze as every head in the room swiveled from Aunt Patricia to me. Nathan's champagne glass halted midway to his lips, his expression caught between a smirk and confusion. "What did you say?" my mother finally asked, looking at Aunt Patricia as if she'd started speaking in tongues. "I asked if that's why Amber bought a 5-bedroom house," Aunt Patricia repeated calmly, taking a sip of her wine. "In Oakwood Estates. 6 months ago." Nathan barked out a laugh, though it sounded forced. "Good one, Aunt Patricia. Amber lives in that 1-bedroom apartment downtown. The one with the leaky ceiling." He turned to me, his smile tight. "Remember when you had to put buckets out during that big storm last year? That had indeed happened. In my old apartment, before my promotion, before my house." I'd mentioned it during a family dinner, and it had become one of Nathan's favorite anecdotes about my living situation. Actually, and Patricia continued before I could respond, I stayed in Amber's guest suite last month when I was in town for my dental conference. The one with the attached bathroom and the lovely bay window overlooking her Japanese maple tree. All eyes returned to me. My father's brow furrowed deeply. Amber, what is she talking about? I stood there, heart pounding, at the crossroads I'd been avoiding for years. I could laugh it off, concoct some explanation about Aunt Patricia being confused. I could preserve the familiar family dynamic that, while painful, was at least predictable. Or I could finally step into my truth. She's talking about my house, I said quietly. I bought it 6 months ago, after my promotion to senior software architect at Griffin Technologies. Nathan's face flushed red. That's ridiculous. You would have said something. Would I? I asked, meeting his gaze steadily. When exactly would have been a good time to mention it? When you were announcing your promotion. When you were talking about this apartment. There never seems to be room in family conversations for my news. Show them the photos, Amber, Aunt Patricia suggested gently. With slightly trembling hands, I pulled out my phone, opened my photo gallery, and pulled up images of my home. I hesitated only briefly before passing the phone to Samantha, who happened to be nearest to me. Her eyes widened as she swiped through the pictures. This is your house? She asked, genuine surprise in her voice. It's beautiful. The phone made its way around the room, expressions of shock on each face as they viewed the images of my spacious living room with its vaulted ceiling, the gourmet kitchen with the center island I'd always dreamed of, the backyard with its swimming pool and carefully landscaped garden. When the phone reached Nathan, he stared at it for a long moment, his jaw clenched. This could be anyone's house, he said finally, though his tone lacked conviction. You could have pulled these from a real estate website. The fourth picture is of Amber's home office, and Patricia pointed out. You can see her graduate degree from State University on the wall, and that ugly ceramic cat I gave her for her 30th birthday on the bookshelf. Nathan zoomed in on the photo, then looked up at me, his expression a mixture of disbelief and something else, hurt, perhaps, or betrayal. The phone continued its journey to my parents, who huddled together over the screen, their faces a study in confusion. I don't understand, my mother said finally, looking up at me. Why wouldn't you tell us about this? The question hung in the air, loaded with decades of family history. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm settle over me. This moment of truth had been a long time coming. Because, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, whenever I've shared my achievements in the past, they've either been dismissed or somehow turned into a competition with Nathan. It was easier to keep my success to myself than to have it diminished or ignored. That's not true, my father protested immediately. We've always been supportive of both our children. Aunt Patricia made a small noise that might have been a suppressed laugh or a scoff. My mother shot her a warning look. Is that really how you feel, Amber? Samantha asked softly, genuine concern in her eyes. I nodded, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. Yes, for as long as I can remember. The room had grown uncomfortably quiet. Some guests were looking at their phones or suddenly finding great interest in their drinks, clearly wishing they weren't witnessing this family drama. I think I'd like to see this house for myself, Nathan said abruptly, handing my phone back to me with more force than necessary. Tomorrow. No, I said, the word coming out before I'd fully processed it. I'm not ready for visitors yet. Not ready, he repeated incredulously. But apparently Aunt Patricia has already stayed there. Because Aunt Patricia has always supported me, I replied simply. She's earned her place in my home and in my life. The implications of my words hung heavily in the air. Nathan's face darkened, and he opened his mouth to respond, but Samantha placed a gentle hand on his arm, silently cautioning him. In that moment, looking at my brother's face contorted with wounded pride and my parents' expressions of confused disbelief, I realized that the truth, once spoken, couldn't be taken back. The careful facade I'd maintained for years had cracked open, exposing the reality of our family dynamics to everyone in the room. Whether this would lead to healing or deeper division remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: things would never be quite the same again. The silence that followed felt like it lasted an eternity, though it was probably only seconds. Finally, Nathan broke it with a forced laugh. "Well, this is quite the revelation for a housewarming party," he said, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Maybe we should get back to celebrating our new place?" But the mood had irreversibly shifted. The casual party atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by a tension you could almost touch. Several guests murmured excuses about early morning commitments and began making their way toward the door. Samantha, looking uncomfortable but determined, started collecting empty glasses to take to the kitchen. My mother stepped forward, her face a mask of hurt confusion. "Amber, can we please speak privately?" she asked, gesturing toward the second bedroom. I nodded, following her and my father into the small office space. As soon as the door closed behind us, my mother turned to me. "How could you keep something like this from us?" she demanded, her voice wavering between anger and hurt. "We're your parents." "I've been keeping things from you for years, Mom," I replied quietly. "This is just the first time you've noticed." My father shook his head. "That's not fair, Amber. We've always taken an interest in your life." "Have you?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the emotions churning inside me. "When I graduated with honors from State University after working full-time through school, you spent the entire celebration dinner talking about Nathan's new car." "That's not," my father began. "When I got my first promotion to lead developer," I continued, "and mentioned it at Thanksgiving, you changed the subject to Nathan's company softball team. When I told you I was taking coding classes on weekends to advance my skills, Mom, you said I should focus more on dating instead." My mother looked genuinely perplexed. "We just wanted you to have a balanced life." "But you never said that to Nathan," I pointed out. "His career ambitions were always celebrated, never questioned." "Nathan has always been more fragile than you," my mother said defensively. "He needed more encouragement." The irony of her statement made me laugh despite myself. "Do you hear yourself, Mom? You're saying you favored Nathan because he needed it more, while assuming I didn't need encouragement or recognition at all." My father ran a hand through his thinning hair. "We never meant to make you feel less important, Amber. We just... Nathan was always more vocal about his needs, and you seemed so self-sufficient." "I had to be," I replied. "I learned early on that if I wanted something, I had to make it happen myself." A knock at the door interrupted us. Aunt Patricia poked her head in. "Sorry to intrude, but things are getting uncomfortable out there. Nathan is telling everyone that Amber must be in massive debt or doing something illegal to afford her house." My mother gasped. "He wouldn't." "He is," Aunt Patricia confirmed grimly. "And Joyce, instead of defending your daughter, maybe you should hear what she's saying. I've watched for years as you and Walter fawned over Nathan while Amber's achievements went unacknowledged. It's not right, and deep down, you know it." My father's face flushed. "Now wait just a minute." But I'd had enough. I brushed past them and returned to the living room, where Nathan was indeed holding court with the remaining guests. "Software developers don't make that kind of money unless they're at the executive level," he was saying. "And Amber certainly isn't." "Actually," I interrupted, my voice carrying across the room, "I am at the executive level. I lead a team of 15 developers working on security protocols for financial institutions. My base salary is substantially higher than you might think, plus I receive performance bonuses and stock options." Nathan's expression darkened. "Well, aren't you suddenly full of yourself?" "No," I replied calmly. "I'm simply stating facts after years of staying silent while you constructed narratives about both our lives that weren't accurate. I've never. You've consistently exaggerated your own achievements while minimizing mine," I continued. "You called yourself a regional sales director tonight when your title is manager. You implied you oversee territories when you manage 3 people. You suggested you bought this apartment without help, but Mom and Dad contributed to your down payment." Gasps from several guests indicated this wasn't common knowledge. Samantha looked surprised as well, suggesting Nathan hadn't been entirely truthful with her either. "That's enough," my father said sharply, emerging from the bedroom with my mother. "Amber, you're being disrespectful." "I'm being honest," I corrected him. "There's a difference." "Well, your honesty is ruining your brother's special evening," my mother said, her voice tight with disapproval. I looked around at the uncomfortable faces of the remaining guests, at Samantha's confusion, at Nathan's barely contained fury. This wasn't how I'd imagined this confrontation, but now that it had begun, I wouldn't back down. "I'm sorry if the truth is inconvenient," I said, gathering my purse from the counter. "But I'm done pretending to be less than I am to make Nathan feel better about himself." "So that's it?" Nathan demanded, his voice rising. "You show up with your secret mansion and superior attitude and just leave?" I turned to face him directly. "Nathan, I've supported you at countless events celebrating your achievements, real and exaggerated. I've listened to you belittle my career, my living situation, and my life choices for years without complaint. Tonight, when you mocked me in front of everyone, I finally decided enough was enough." "I was just making a joke," he protested, though his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Your jokes always come at my expense," I replied. "And they stopped being funny a long time ago." Samantha stepped forward, placing a hand on Nathan's arm. "I think everyone's emotions are running high right now," she said diplomatically. "Maybe we should all take some time to process." I nodded gratefully at her. "I think that's wise." "Nathan, Samantha, thank you for having me. Congratulations on your new home." I moved toward the door, then paused. "Mom, Dad, I'd like to have a calmer conversation about all this sometime soon, if you're willing." My father looked away, his expression unreadable, but my mother gave a tight nod. As I opened the door to leave, Aunt Patricia joined me. "I'll walk you out," she said, linking her arm through mine. In the hallway outside the apartment, I finally let out the breath I felt like I'd been holding for hours. "Well, that was long overdue," Aunt Patricia finished for me, squeezing my arm. "I'm proud of you, Amber. Standing up for yourself isn't easy, especially with family." "Do you think they'll ever understand?" I asked as we descended the stairs. Maybe not," she replied honestly. "But that's not entirely the point. You needed to claim your truth, for yourself more than for them." As we reached my car, I turned to hug her. "Thank you for being in my corner all these years." She patted my back. "Always have been, always will be. Now, drive safe. And remember, whatever happens next, you've already won the most important battle, which is learning to value yourself even when others don't." With those words echoing in my mind, I drove home to my beautiful, peaceful house, the physical manifestation of my success that I'd hidden for too long. Whether my family ever fully recognized my achievements or not, I knew my own worth. And for the first time, I'd refused to let anyone diminish it. The day after Nathan's housewarming party dawned bright and clear, contrasting sharply with the emotional storm of the previous evening. I woke early, the events replaying in my mind as I made coffee in my sunlit kitchen. The confrontation that had been brewing for years had finally happened, and surprisingly, I felt lighter. Uncertain about what came next, but lighter. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "How is the party of doom? Still alive?" I called her instead of texting back, knowing this conversation needed more than written words. "You wouldn't believe what happened," I began, then recounted the entire evening in detail. "Holy crap," Diana exclaimed when I finished. "You actually told them about the house? After all this time?" "Well, technically Aunt Patricia did," I clarified. "But yes, it's all out in the open now." "How does it feel?" she asked. I considered the question, watching a hummingbird hover near the feeder outside my kitchen window. Scary. Liberating. Unfinished. Unfinished. Things blew up, but nothing was really resolved. I explained. I don't know where we go from here. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone beeped with incoming messages. The first was from Nathan. We need to talk. I want to see this house. Today. I showed the screen to Diana via our video call. She raised her eyebrows. Demanding as ever, I see. He's not coming here, I said firmly. Not yet, not like this. I typed a response. I'm not ready for visitors. I need some time, and I think you do too. His reply came almost instantly. So Aunt Patricia gets the grand tour, but your own brother doesn't? Nice. I put the phone down without responding. The second message was from my mother. Your father and I are very upset about last night. Please call when you can. Diana watched my expression change as I read it. Parents? I nodded. They're very upset. Because clearly I'm the one who created this situation. Classic, Diana sighed. What are you going to do? Not call right away, I decided. I need to figure out what I want from these relationships going forward before I dive back in. The next text was from Samantha. Surprising me, I had no idea about any of this. Not about your house or career or about the down payment from your parents. I'm sorry about how things went last night. Nathan is still processing, but I hope we can talk when things calm down. This message felt different, genuine, without the defensive edge that characterized my family's communications. I might respond to Samantha, I told Diana. She seems to actually want to understand. Proceed with caution, Diana advised. She's still married to your brother. After we hung up, I spent the day doing things that grounded me, working in my garden, organizing my home office, taking a long swim in my pool. Activities that reminded me of what I'd built for myself, regardless of my family's recognition. In the evening, I finally replied to Samantha. Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate your understanding. This has been complicated for many years, but I'd be open to talking when things settle. Over the next few days, the situation with my family remained in an uncomfortable limbo. Nathan stopped texting demands but posted several passive-aggressive social media updates about people who think they're better than everyone else. My parents left 2 voicemails expressing their disappointment in my behavior but asking me to call. A week after the party, I decided it was time to take a step toward resolution on my terms. I invited my parents to lunch at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. When I arrived, they were already seated, both looking uncomfortable and slightly defensive. My mother's lips were pressed into a thin line, while my father examined the menu with unusual intensity. Thank you for coming, I began after ordering coffee. We weren't sure we'd hear from you again, my mother said, a hint of accusation in her tone. I took a deep breath. I needed some time to process everything. Just like you did. Amber, my father said, setting down the menu, you have to understand how hurtful it was to learn about your house that way. To realize you'd been keeping secrets from us. I do understand that, I acknowledged. And I'm sorry for the way it came out. But I need you to understand why I felt I couldn't share it with you in the first place. Because you think we favor Nathan, my mother said, as if the very idea was absurd. Because you do favor Nathan, I corrected gently. Not in every way, perhaps, but in significant ways that have shaped our family dynamic for as long as I can remember. They started to protest, but I held up a hand. Please, just listen. I've spent years downplaying my achievements and hiding my successes because whenever I shared them, they were either dismissed or somehow turned into a comparison with Nathan. It became easier to keep things to myself than to feel that disappointment repeatedly. My father frowned. We've always been proud of you, Amber. You've never told me that, I said simply. Not in any way that felt genuine or specific to my actual accomplishments. A long silence followed as they seemed to digest this. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice quieter than before. I never realized you felt this way. We didn't intentionally favor Nathan, but perhaps we did focus more on his needs and achievements. Why? I asked, the question that had haunted me for years. My parents exchanged glances. Nathan struggled more, my father admitted reluctantly. in school, with confidence, with finding his path. You always seemed so capable, so self-sufficient. I had to be, I replied, echoing what I'd said at the party. I learned early that I couldn't count on getting the support or recognition I needed, so I became independent out of necessity, not preference. Another silence fell, broken only when our food arrived. As we began eating, my mother asked, "Will you tell us about your house now? And your job? We want to know, truly." For the first time in years, I openly shared details about my life, my promotion, the house hunting process, the renovations I'd done, my future plans. They asked questions that seemed genuinely interested, though I could see them struggling with the revelation of just how successful I'd become. "We would like to see your home," my father said as lunch concluded. "When you're ready." "I'd like that," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. "Maybe in a few weeks, once things settle more." We parted with awkward hugs and promises to talk again soon. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a beginning. 2 weeks later, Aunt Patricia came to stay with me for a long weekend. We spent evenings on my patio, drinking wine and talking about the family situation. "Nathan still hasn't reached out," she asked on her second night. I shook my head. Radio silence, except through his social media jabs. "He'll come around eventually," she predicted. "His pride is wounded, but underneath, I think he's struggling with realizing he's not the only successful one in the family." "Or maybe he's just done with me," I suggested. "Family is rarely that simple," she replied wisely. "Give him time." That weekend, I decided to redecorate the bedroom that had sat empty since I'd moved in. I'd been saving it, though for what, I wasn't entirely sure. With Aunt Patricia's help, I transformed it into a beautiful guest room, acknowledging that I wanted my home to be a place where people I cared about could feel welcome. "This is symbolic, you know," Aunt Patricia observed as we hung curtains. "You're making space in your life for connections." Nearly a month after the party, I received a text from Nathan that simply said, "Can we talk?" We met at a park, neutral territory for both of us. He looked different somehow, less confident, more genuine. "I've been doing some thinking," he began awkwardly, scuffing his shoe against the gravel path. "And talking with Samantha." "A lot of talking." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I didn't realize how I've been coming across all these years," he said finally. "Always comparing, always competing. Samantha says I talk about you differently than you talk about me." "How so?" I asked. "She says when you mention me, it's neutral or positive. When I talk about you, it's usually to point out how I'm doing better in some way." He looked uncomfortable with this admission. I didn't see it until she started pointing it out. "It's been our pattern for a long time," I acknowledged. "Yeah, well, I'm sorry." The words seemed difficult for him to say. "And I'd like to see your house. If that's okay. Not to judge or compete, just to see where my sister lives." His apology and request felt sincere, without the entitled demand of his earlier texts. "I'd like that," I said. "Maybe next weekend?" When Nathan and Samantha visited, I watched my brother's eyes widen as he took in my home. There was envy there, yes, but also something like respect. "This is really something, Amber," he said, standing in my spacious living room. "You've done well for yourself. Really well." "Thank you," I replied simply. "I can see why you love it here," Samantha added warmly. "It suits you." As we had lunch on my patio, our conversation was the most genuine it had been in years. Nathan asked questions about my work that weren't laced with competition, and I found myself genuinely interested in hearing about his projects without the filter of resentment. "I'm thinking of switching companies," he admitted over dessert. "Starting somewhere I can build a reputation based on actual work, not just talk." "That sounds like a good move," I encouraged. A fresh start. 3 months after Nathan's housewarming, I hosted my own. It wasn't a grand affair, just close friends, Aunt Patricia, my parents, Nathan, and Samantha. As we gathered around my dining table, I looked at the faces of my family. The dynamics weren't perfect, There were still moments of tension, old habits that emerged unconsciously, but there was also a new awareness, a conscious effort to relate differently. My mother actually asked specific questions about my recent project at work. My father complimented the renovations I'd done without comparing them to anything of Nathan's. And Nathan, most surprisingly, proposed a toast not to himself, but to me. To Amber, he said, raising his glass. For creating this beautiful home and for having the courage to be authentic. Something I'm still working on. Later that evening, as the party wound down, I stood alone in my kitchen, feeling a profound sense of peace. The journey from hiding my success to owning it openly had been difficult, but necessary. Not just for how others saw me, but for how I saw myself. Living authentically hadn't magically fixed all the complicated dynamics in my family. There were still moments of misunderstanding, old patterns that emerged unconsciously. But bringing the truth into the light had created the possibility of something new and healthier for all of us. I realized that the most valuable thing I'd gained wasn't just recognition from my family, it was the liberation of no longer diminishing myself to make others comfortable. My success, my home, my life were all reflections of my true self, no longer hidden in the shadows of others' narratives. If you've ever hidden parts of yourself to keep the peace or make others comfortable, I hope my story encourages you to consider what might happen if you stepped fully into your truth. It might be messy at first, but the freedom on the other side is worth it. Drop a comment below about a time you had to stand up for yourself with family, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. Thanks for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the hardest person to be honest with is yourself, but it's always worth it in the end.